My name is Mallory Reed, and I'm 34 years old. The first time my daughter publicly asked if I was a bad mother, I honestly felt my entire body go numb. It happened during her elementary school Mother's Day event in front of teachers, parents, folding chairs full of families, and dozens of little kids holding handmade cards covered in glitter. I bent down beside my daughter, Ava, to straighten the collar of her lavender dress because it had folded awkwardly near her shoulder. Just a normal mother thing. But suddenly she pulled away slightly and whispered, "Grandma says good moms don't yell like you do." Everything around me slowed. Parents nearby turned quietly. One teacher stopped hanging decorations beside the stage. I forced a small laugh because honestly, embarrassment makes people react strangely. "What are you talking about, sweetheart?" Then Ava looked directly at me and asked, "So, are you a bad mom sometimes?" The room went completely silent. Before I could even process that, she added softly, "Grandma says you only love me when you're in a good mood." I stood there frozen while people stared at me like they were trying to figure out whether my own daughter was afraid of me. And honestly, that was the exact moment I realized someone had been teaching my child to fear me. But the terrifying part, I still had no idea how deep it really went. Before we continue, welcome to her revenge stories. If this story resonates with you in any way, do me a favor by giving this video a thumbs up and subscribing to the channel. And tell me in the comments what time it is where you're watching from. I somehow made it through the rest of the Mother's Day event without falling apart. Honestly, I still don't know how. I smiled for pictures beside Ava while my hands shook so badly behind my back that I had to lock my fingers together to hide it. Other mothers stood nearby holding flowers and handmade cards while pretending not to stare at me. But they were staring. I could feel it. That uncomfortable kind of sympathy people give when they think a child accidentally exposed something ugly about a parent. And the worst part, Ava didn't even realize what she had done. She sat beside me quietly coloring on the back of her program while humming softly to herself like she hadn't just cracked something open inside my chest. Meanwhile my mother-in-law, Colleen Mercer, sat 3 rows back looking perfectly calm. Perfectly composed. At one point our eyes met across the gymnasium. And I swear, there was something almost satisfied in her expression. That thought followed me all the way to the parking lot afterward. The second Ava climbed into the back seat of my Honda, I shut the driver's door and just sat there gripping the steering wheel for a moment. The inside of the car smelled faintly like French fries and Ava's strawberry shampoo. Normally those little things comforted me. Not that day. That day I felt sick. Real sick. I started the engine quietly and pulled out of the school parking lot while Ava kicked her little white shoes against the back seat absent-mindedly. For a few minutes neither of us spoke. Then finally I asked carefully, "Baby, why would Grandma say those things about me?" Ava shrugged like it was normal conversation. "Because she says dads leave when moms get difficult." My hands tightened around the steering wheel immediately. The light ahead turned red, but honestly I barely noticed. "What do you mean?" She said Daddy got tired of fighting and stress. I swallowed hard. Because suddenly I wasn't just hearing criticism anymore. I was hearing adult emotional manipulation coming out of a 7-year-old child. And before I could even process that, Ava kept talking softly while staring out the window. "Grandma says I should stay quiet when you're upset." I looked at her through the rearview mirror. "Why?" She says angry moms say hurtful things sometimes. That one physically hurt. Not dramatic movie hurt. Real hurt. The kind that settles heavy inside your stomach. Because those weren't thoughts Ava created herself. Those were carefully planted fears. And deep down, I think part of me already knew that. I just wasn't ready to admit it yet. The drive home became painfully quiet after that. Rain tapped lightly against the windshield while traffic crawled through downtown Milwaukee, and all I could think about was how my daughter suddenly sounded like somebody trying to emotionally survive me instead of simply loving me. That terrified me. Especially because I already carried enough guilt before any of this started. My marriage to Everett Reed had been falling apart long before the divorce papers showed up. At first it was just stress. Money stress. Work stress. Life stress. The kind that sneaks into conversations slowly until every discussion somehow turns into tension. Everett lost a major investment 2 years into our marriage, and after that everything changed. He became distant. Bitter sometimes. Quiet in ways that felt heavier than yelling. Meanwhile I was working longer shifts at St. Anna's pediatric clinic trying to keep us financially stable. Some nights I came home so exhausted I'd sit inside the car for 10 extra minutes just trying to gather enough energy to walk upstairs. But still. I tried. God, I tried. I packed Ava's lunches before sunrise. Stayed awake helping with preschool projects after 12-hour shifts. Folded laundry at midnight while half asleep on the couch. I remember one winter night specifically. Ava had a fever, Everett was angry about overdue bills, and I spent almost 3 hours sitting on our bathroom floor holding our little girl upright while steam from the shower helped her breathe easier. The entire time Everett stayed downstairs drinking whiskey and scrolling silently through his phone. That was pretty much our marriage near the end. Me surviving things. Him emotionally disappearing from them. And eventually one night during an argument about money, Everett finally said what both of us already knew. I can't live like this anymore. No screaming. No dramatic explosion. Just exhaustion. A month later, he moved out permanently. And suddenly everything became my responsibility. Bills. School. Work. Motherhood. Survival. All at once. There were weeks I barely slept 4 hours a night. Weeks where my back hurt constantly from double shifts and stress headaches followed me everywhere. I stopped buying things for myself completely. I remember wearing the same gray sneakers for almost 2 years because every extra dollar went toward Ava. Dance uniforms. School supplies. Doctor visits. Lunch money. One time Ava casually told her teacher, "My mommy can fix anything." And I went into the clinic bathroom afterward and cried for 10 minutes because I felt like I was failing at everything. But through all of it, I loved my daughter more fiercely than anything in this world. That's the part nobody seemed to understand. I wasn't absent because I didn't care. I was exhausted because I cared too much. After my divorce, I kept telling myself things would eventually calm down. That once I worked enough overtime. Once bills stopped piling up. Once Ava just emotionally. Life would finally breathe again. But honestly, the opposite happened. Everything became heavier. The apartment felt emptier after Everett left. Some nights the silence was so loud it almost felt physical. I'd sit at the kitchen table staring at unpaid bills while Ava slept on the couch beside cartoons she never finished because she always fell asleep waiting for me to slow down. And through all of that, Colleen Mercer stepped in like someone sent to save us. At first, I truly believed she cared. Actually, I think part of me needed to believe that. Because when you're exhausted and drowning emotionally, kindness feels dangerous to question. Colleen started helping little by little. At first it was simple things. Picking Ava up from school when my shift ran late. Keeping her overnight during storms. Bringing casseroles to my apartment when I looked too tired to cook. And Ava adored her. Honestly, everybody adored Colleen. She had this calmness about her that made people trust her immediately. Soft voice. Gentle smile. Always patient, even when Ava spilled juice or threw tantrums. Meanwhile I constantly felt rushed. Tired. Late. Distracted. One Friday evening I arrived almost 40 minutes late to Ava's dance recital because an emergency patient came into the clinic right before my shift ended. I remember rushing into the school auditorium still wearing scrubs under my coat, completely out of breath. The recital had already started. And there sat Ava beside Colleen in the front row, happily eating crackers from a Ziploc bag while other mothers sat with curled hair and cameras ready. The second Ava saw me, she smiled. But then she asked something that quietly broke me. Did work keep you again? Not angry. Not dramatic. Just used to it. That hurt worse somehow. After the recital, Colleen squeezed my shoulder gently near the parking lot. You're doing your best, she told me softly. And I almost cried hearing that because nobody else had said it in months. Soon Ava started spending more weekends with her grandmother. Then holidays. Then random weekdays whenever my schedule became impossible. And honestly, at first it helped. For the first time in forever, I could occasionally sleep more than 5 hours without waking up panicked about schedules or babysitters. Colleen made everything seem stable. Safe. She packed Ava homemade lunches. Braided her hair before school. Helped with homework. Read bedtime stories. Sometimes I'd arrive to pick Ava up and find them baking cookies together while old jazz music played softly in the kitchen. Those moments made me feel relieved. And guilty at the same time. Because Ava looked peaceful there. Calmer somehow. Meanwhile my own life constantly felt one missed paycheck away from collapse. Then came the winter I got pneumonia. That period changed everything. I tried ignoring the symptoms at first because single mothers don't really get the luxury of stopping. But eventually I nearly fainted during a shift and one of the doctors forced me into urgent care. The next week became a blur of antibiotics, fever, exhaustion, and missed work. And during all of it, Colleen practically took over Ava's routine completely. School pickups. Baths. Meals. Everything. One evening while I sat wrapped in blankets coughing on my apartment couch, Colleen quietly said something that stayed in my head afterward. This isn't sustainable, Mallory. I looked up slowly. You're running yourself into the ground. I didn't even argue because honestly, she wasn't wrong. Then she said the sentence that changed our entire lives. What if Ava stayed with me during school weeks? The room became very quiet. Even Ava looked up from her coloring book immediately. Colleen continued gently. You'd still see her constantly. Weekends, evenings, holidays. But this way she'd have more routine. And you could finally breathe. My chest tightened instantly. Because every part of me hated the idea. Ava was my daughter. Mine. The thought of waking up without hearing her tiny footsteps in the hallway every morning physically hurt. But at the same time, I was exhausted. Completely exhausted. And the worst part. A small selfish piece of me wanted relief. That guilt nearly destroyed me. I don't know. I whispered quietly. Colleen immediately softened her voice. Nobody's taking her away from you. Then Ava suddenly smiled from the floor. Can I still have sleepovers every week? Colleen laughed warmly. Of course. And seeing how happy Ava looked made saying no feel cruel somehow. So eventually, I agreed. Temporary, I told myself. Just until life stabilized. Just until I got financially ahead again. The first Monday morning after Ava officially moved into Colleen's house during school weeks, I walked into her empty bedroom and completely broke down crying beside her unmade bed. Because deep down, something already felt wrong. I just didn't know exactly what yet. At first, the changes in Ava were so small I almost convinced myself they weren't real. That's the dangerous thing about emotional distance. It rarely arrives loudly. It happens quietly. Gradually. In tiny moments you excuse until suddenly nothing feels the same anymore. The first few weeks after Ava started staying with Colleen during school days actually seemed fine. Better than fine, honestly. Ava's grades improved. She stopped looking exhausted every morning. Her attendance became perfect. Even her teacher emailed me once saying, "Ava seems more emotionally settled lately." I remember reading that message during lunch break at the clinic and crying quietly in the supply closet because I thought maybe I'd finally made the right decision. Maybe stability really was what she needed. So whenever guilt started creeping in, I pushed it down. But then little things started happening. Small strange things. Like the way Ava stopped running toward me excitedly whenever I visited Colleen's house. Before, she used to launch herself into my arms the second she heard my car pull into the driveway. Now, sometimes she barely looked up from cartoons. One Friday evening I brought her favorite chocolate chip muffins after work, still warm from the bakery near the clinic. Normally that would have made her scream with excitement. Instead she smiled politely and said, "Grandma already made cupcakes." I know that sounds tiny. But when you're a mother already scared you're failing, tiny things feel enormous. Then came the comparisons. Constant little comparisons. At first they sounded harmless. Grandma braids my hair gentler. Grandma remembers where all my socks are. Grandma makes pancakes better. I laughed those off. Honestly, some were probably true. But over time, the comments became different. Sharper somehow. One afternoon Ava spilled orange juice across Colleen's kitchen table while I was helping her with homework. Instinctively, I sighed and reached for paper towels. Nothing dramatic. Just tired. But immediately Ava stiffened. Actually stiffened. Then quietly she said, "Grandma never raises her voice over accidents." I froze. Because I hadn't even raised my voice. Not even close. Before I could respond, Colleen stepped in gently from the sink. "Take it easy on her, Mallory." The tone sounded calm. Soft. Protective. But something about it embarrassed me instantly. Like I was being watched and evaluated inside every interaction with my own daughter. Ava lowered her eyes afterward and whispered, "Sorry." That word hurt me more than the spilled juice. Because she sounded nervous apologizing to me. And once I noticed it, I started noticing it everywhere. The careful expressions before speaking. The quick apologies. The way Ava studied my face whenever I got quiet after work. Almost like she was checking whether I was safe emotionally that day. One night we were watching a movie together in Colleen's living room when Ava climbed into her grandmother's lap instead of mine. Again, not a huge thing. Kids do that. But then she looked over at me and said casually, "Grandma says good moms don't get frustrated all the time." The room went still. I laughed awkwardly because honestly, what else was I supposed to do? But deep down something cold moved through my chest. Because those weren't normal little kid observations anymore. Those sounded taught. Later that evening, while Ava brushed her teeth upstairs, I quietly confronted Colleen in the kitchen. "I feel like Ava's becoming nervous around me." Colleen immediately looked surprised. "Oh Mallory, don't overthink things. I'm serious." She dried a plate slowly before answering. "You work a lot. Sometimes children become emotionally cautious around stress." Stress. There was that word again. Always said so gently. So reasonably. Like everything somehow circled back to me being the problem. And honestly, part of me believed her. Because I was exhausted constantly. There were days I forgot permission slips. Days I snapped over messy shoes by the front door. Days I fell asleep halfway through bedtime stories. So every time Ava compared me to Colleen, guilt swallowed me whole. Especially because Colleen always looked calm while I constantly felt one bad day away from emotional collapse. By springtime, I started feeling like a visitor in my daughter's life instead of her mother. And the worst part? I still blamed myself for almost all of it. By the beginning of summer, Ava no longer acted like a child fully relaxed around her own mother. And once that realization settled inside me, I couldn't unsee it anymore. It showed up in little moments first. Painfully little moments. Like how she apologized before I even responded to things. One Saturday afternoon we were shopping for school supplies at a crowded Target downtown. Ava accidentally knocked over a small display of notebooks while reaching for glitter pens. Before I could even bend down to help her, she immediately started panicking. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Please don't be upset." People nearby turned briefly from the noise, and I remember kneeling beside her thinking, why does my child sound afraid of disappointing me all the time? I hugged her immediately and told her it was fine. Because it was fine. They were notebooks. But Ava stayed unusually quiet the rest of the trip, carefully watching my face every few minutes like she was trying to predict my mood. That hurt me more than I admitted out loud. Then came the flinching. Not dramatic flinching. Not abuse-level fear. Honestly, that would have almost been easier to understand. This was subtler. The kind of emotional caution children develop when somebody quietly teaches them another person is unpredictable. One evening I was helping Ava with homework at Colleen's house after a brutal 12-hour shift. My head hurt, my scrubs smelled faintly like antiseptic, and I hadn't eaten since noon. I reached for a glass of water while explaining a math problem and accidentally knocked the glass onto the kitchen tile. It shattered instantly. The sound startled both of us. And before I could even react, Ava whispered quickly. "Please don't get angry." I just stared at her. Because I wasn't angry. At all. Tired? Absolutely. Embarrassed? Maybe. But angry? No. And somehow that made the moment even worse. I slowly crouched to clean the broken glass while Ava sat frozen at the table watching me carefully. Then Colleen entered the kitchen. Her eyes immediately moved to Ava first. Not me. "Ava, sweetheart, are you okay?" That question bothered me instantly. Like the concern wasn't about the broken glass. It was about me. "I'm fine," Ava said softly. Colleen glanced at me before speaking in that same calm voice she always used. "Long day, Mallory." I nodded quietly. And somehow even that simple question made me feel judged. Not openly. Subtly. Like she was gently collecting evidence that I was emotionally overwhelmed again. That night while driving home alone, I cried harder than I had in months. Not because Ava hurt my feelings. She was 7. Children repeat what they absorb. What crushed me was realizing my daughter no longer seemed emotionally safe around me. And still. I blamed myself. I told myself divorce probably damaged her emotionally more than I realized. Maybe hearing Everett and me argue years earlier affected her deeply. Maybe my exhaustion showed too much. Maybe my stress leaked into motherhood in ways I didn't notice. So instead of questioning Colleen fully, I started trying harder. Harder at everything. I picked up fewer overtime shifts even though bills terrified me. I planned movie nights. Cooked homemade dinners more often. Started reading with Ava every evening instead of checking work emails constantly. And for brief moments, things felt normal again. One night we baked cinnamon cookies together while old pop songs played from my kitchen speaker, and Ava laughed so hard flour exploded across the counter. That sound healed something inside me temporarily. But even then, Colleen somehow remained emotionally present between us. Always there. Always influencing quietly. Whenever Ava called me upset about something small, somehow Colleen had already comforted her first. Whenever school problems happened, Colleen usually knew before I did. And gradually, Ava started positioning her grandmother as the emotionally safe parent figure without even realizing it. One afternoon while brushing Ava's hair before church, I accidentally tugged too hard near a knot. Ava immediately said, "Grandma says people who love you shouldn't make you nervous." I stopped brushing instantly. My stomach dropped. Because again, that wasn't a child speaking naturally. That was somebody else's voice coming through her. I looked at Ava carefully through the mirror. "Do I make you nervous?" She hesitated. And honestly, that hesitation nearly broke me more than any answer could have. Then quietly she whispered, "Sometimes when you're stressed." I had to look away after that because tears burned my eyes immediately. And while Ava continued talking innocently about school afterward, one terrifying thought finally started growing louder inside my head. What if this wasn't accidental anymore? What if somebody was teaching my daughter to see me this way on purpose? After the Mother's Day event, I couldn't stop replaying Ava's words in my head. Not just once. Constantly. While charting patient notes at work. While folding laundry at midnight. While sitting at red lights during traffic. Grandma says good moms don't yell like you do. Grandma says you only love me when you're in a good mood. Those sentences followed me everywhere like ghosts. And honestly, the more I thought about them, the less they sounded accidental. By then I wasn't sleeping properly anymore. I'd wake up around 3 in the morning with this heavy feeling in my chest like something inside my own family was slowly slipping away from me while I stood there pretending not to notice. So eventually, I called Ava's school. Not dramatically. I actually tried sounding casual. Like a normal parent checking in. It was during my lunch break at the clinic. I remember sitting alone in my car because the break room felt too loud that day. Ava's teacher, Mrs. Holloway, answered warmly. "Oh, Mallory. Ava's doing wonderful." I smiled automatically. That's good to hear. I just wanted updates about school activities and things coming up. There was a tiny pause on the phone. Then Mrs. Holloway laughed softly. "Well, your mother-in-law usually stays very informed already." My stomach tightened instantly. "What do you mean?" "Oh, Colleen attends almost everything." I sat up straighter immediately. Everything? Reading days, parent breakfasts, art showcases, field trip meetings. Honestly, she's incredibly involved. My fingers slowly tightened around the phone. Because I hadn't heard about half those events. Not once. Mrs. Holloway kept talking casually, completely unaware she was destroying me emotionally in real time. "She's wonderful with Ava." The office staff actually thought she was her primary guardian at first. That sentence physically hurt. Primary guardian. I stared through my windshield at people walking across the parking lot while my heartbeat became uneven. Because suddenly all those forgotten permission slips and missed school notices didn't feel random anymore. I forced myself to keep my voice steady. I wasn't informed about some of those events. Another pause. "Oh. Colleen usually said your schedule was difficult and she didn't want the school overwhelming you unnecessarily." There it was again. That same careful language. Protecting me. Helping me. Managing my stress. Except somehow every act of help slowly erased me from my daughter's life. The second the call ended, I just sat there frozen. Then I cried. Hard. Inside my car in hospital scrubs while people walked past outside not realizing a mother was quietly realizing she'd been replaced piece by piece without even noticing. That evening I drove straight to Colleen's house. The second she opened the door, she smiled warmly like always. "Mallory, sweetheart. Why wasn't I told about Ava's school events?" Her expression barely changed. Honestly, that almost scared me more. Colleen stepped aside calmly and motioned for me to come inside. "I didn't want to overwhelm you." There it was again. That sentence. Soft. Reasonable. Impossible to argue against without sounding ungrateful. But this time something about it felt deeply wrong. "She's my daughter," I said quietly. "And I've only ever tried helping you," Colleen replied gently. Ava came running downstairs before the conversation could continue, and immediately the entire atmosphere shifted. Colleen became warm grandmother again. Ava became cheerful again. And somehow I became the tense outsider standing in the middle of their routine. That realization stayed with me the entire night. I ended up sleeping over because heavy rain made driving difficult, and sometime after midnight I woke up thirsty. The house was dark except for a faint light coming from Colleen's office near the hallway. At first I wasn't trying to listen. Honestly. But then I heard my name. I stopped walking immediately. Colleen's office door was slightly open, and her voice carried softly into the hallway. "She's emotionally unstable from stress," she whispered. A cold feeling spread through my chest instantly. Then another woman's voice answered through speakerphone. "Her sister, Diane. You think Ava notices?" "Of course she notices," Colleen replied calmly. "Children always notice unstable mothers." My stomach dropped. I moved closer quietly without meaning to. Then I heard the sentence that changed everything. "Ava needs emotional caution around Mallory. She depends on her moods too much." I physically grabbed the hallway wall beside me. Because suddenly all those comments, all the fear, all the nervous apologies, finally started making horrifying sense. And Colleen kept talking. "I'm only trying to protect Ava emotionally. The less dependent she becomes on Mallory, the safer she'll feel long-term." Safer? From me? Tears instantly filled my eyes. Not loud crying. Just silent disbelief. Because in that moment, standing barefoot in a dark hallway while rain hit the windows outside, I finally realized something terrifying. This wasn't misunderstanding anymore. This wasn't accidental influence. Someone had been teaching my daughter to fear me intentionally. After overhearing Colleen that night, I stopped sleeping properly. Not because I was confused anymore. Because suddenly everything made terrifying sense. Every apology. Every nervous glance. Every time Ava studied my face before speaking. None of it was random. And honestly, once your mind finally accepts something painful, you start seeing proof everywhere. The next few days, I pretended everything was normal. That part was hard. Really hard. I still came over for dinner sometimes. Still smiled when Ava showed me drawings from school. Still thanked Colleen when she packed extra snacks for Ava's lunch. Meanwhile inside, I felt like I was slowly falling apart. Because now every interaction felt staged somehow. Calculated. One Thursday evening, I arrived at Colleen's house earlier than usual after a cancelled shift at the clinic. Ava was upstairs showering, and Colleen had stepped outside to speak with a neighbor near the driveway. That's when I noticed the office door slightly open again. For a second, I just stood there staring at it. My heart was pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears. Part of me knew I should walk away. But another part of me, the mother part, already knew something was deeply wrong. So I walked inside. The room smelled faintly like lavender and printer paper. Everything looked neat, organized, almost painfully controlled. Then I saw the notebooks. 3 thick floral notebooks stacked carefully beside her desk lamp. I opened the first one slowly. And honestly, I wish I could say I was shocked. But deep down, I think my body already knew what I was about to find. Pages and pages filled with notes about me. Dates. Observations. Comments. Mallory arrived emotionally drained again tonight. Ava became quiet after Mallory corrected her tone. Continue reinforcing emotional caution. My stomach turned immediately. I flipped another page. More notes. Children feel safer around emotional consistency. Mallory's stress creates instability. Then came something even worse. A section titled, Helpful Phrases for Ava. I physically stopped breathing for a second. Underneath were sentences carefully written down. Good moms stay calm. People who love you shouldn't make you nervous. Distance creates emotional safety. Children should fear unstable mothers a little. My hands started shaking. Because suddenly I wasn't looking at concern anymore. I was looking at psychological conditioning. Intentional conditioning. Carefully repeated emotional ideas planted into my daughter over time until she no longer trusted her own mother naturally. And the terrifying part. Colleen genuinely believed she was helping. That somehow made it worse. Then I noticed an old phone charger plugged near the desk drawer. Inside the drawer sat a second phone. I hesitated before unlocking it. No password. Almost like she never imagined anyone would question her. The messages inside made my chest feel hollow. Voice notes between Colleen and her sister Diane. One played automatically after I tapped the screen accidentally. Diane's voice crackled softly through the speaker. The more Ava depends emotionally on you, the harder it'll be for Mallory to damage her confidence later. Then Colleen replied calmly. I'm trying to help Ava recognize unhealthy emotional patterns early. Unhealthy emotional patterns. They were talking about me like I was dangerous. Like I was some unstable threat instead of a tired single mother barely surviving. Another voice note played. Don't let Ava become too emotionally attached again. Mallory still confuses guilt with love. I covered my mouth immediately because tears hit me so fast I almost made noise. Guilt with love. That sentence broke something inside me. Because they had turned my exhaustion into proof that I didn't deserve emotional trust from my own daughter. And while I stood there trying not to completely fall apart, footsteps suddenly sounded outside the office. I shoved the phone back quickly and closed the notebook just as Colleen entered the hallway. For one horrifying second, I thought she knew. But instead she smiled softly. Everything all right? I nodded too fast. Yeah. Just looking for Ava's charger. My voice barely sounded normal. That night after Ava fell asleep beside me during movie night, I sat awake staring at the ceiling realizing this situation was bigger than emotional manipulation now. Colleen had slowly rewritten who I was inside my daughter's mind. And if I didn't stop it soon, I was genuinely afraid Ava would grow up believing love from me was something unsafe. Then graduation preparations started. Ava's third-grade graduation was only 2 weeks away, and Colleen suddenly became heavily involved in helping her prepare a special speech. At first I ignored it. But then one afternoon, while dropping off Ava's dance shoes unexpectedly, I heard voices upstairs. Ava was practicing. Softly reading from paper. Some people become mothers because they give birth. I froze near the staircase. Then Ava continued. But other people become mothers because they protect you every day. My stomach dropped instantly. Colleen's voice answered gently. Slower, sweetheart. Make it emotional. Ava kept reading. Grandma always makes me feel safe when life feels scary. I couldn't move. Because suddenly I understood exactly what Colleen planned to do. Publicly. At graduation. And for the first time since all this started, I stopped feeling confused. I started preparing. The morning of Ava's graduation, I barely managed to eat. My stomach had been twisted in knots since sunrise. Outside, summer rain tapped softly against my apartment windows while Ava sat cross-legged on the living room floor practicing her speech one final time under her breath. Every single word hurt me. Not because she meant to hurt me. Because she truly believed what she was saying. That was the devastating part. Colleen had repeated those ideas so carefully, so gently, that my daughter thought they were simply truths about life. About me. And honestly, sitting there watching Ava smooth wrinkles from her little white graduation dress while nervously rehearsing lines meant to publicly replace me emotionally. I realized this wasn't just manipulation anymore. This was theft. The theft of trust between a mother and child. The drive to school felt painfully quiet. Ava held her folded speech carefully in her lap while Colleen sat beside her in the back seat adjusting the flower pinned into Ava's curls. Meanwhile, I drove silently, trying not to completely fall apart before we even arrived. The elementary school auditorium was already crowded when we got there. Parents filled rows of folding chairs holding balloons, flowers, and phones ready for pictures. Teachers rushed around organizing students near the stage while soft piano music played through overhead speakers. Everything looked normal. Happy. But underneath all of it, I felt this unbearable pressure building in my chest because unlike everyone else in that room, I knew exactly what was coming. Halfway through the ceremony, students started walking onto stage one by one to read speeches about important people in their lives. Some were funny. Some sweet. Some awkward in that innocent kid way. Parents laughed softly. Teachers wiped tears occasionally. The second Ava broke down crying in my arms, the entire auditorium changed. Not loud. Not chaotic. Just heavy. Like everybody inside that room suddenly realized they had witnessed something far darker than a simple family disagreement. Ava clung to me tightly while her tiny body shook against my chest. And honestly, I think that was the first time in almost 2 years my daughter held onto me without hesitation. Without studying my face first. Without emotional caution. Just instinct. Like a child finally running back towards safety after being afraid for too long. Meanwhile, behind us, Colleen completely lost control of the calm image she'd spent years building. No, she cried suddenly. That's not what this was. Her voice echoed sharply through the auditorium. Parents exchanged uncomfortable glances while teachers slowly moved children toward the side curtains, sensing this moment had become too emotionally heavy for them. Colleen stepped closer to the stage with tears streaming down her face. I was protecting her. She shouted. Mallory was overwhelmed all the time. Ava was constantly anxious around her. I looked up slowly from where I was holding Ava. Anxious because you taught her to be. The room went silent again. Colleen shook her head desperately. You worked constantly. You were exhausted all the time. I just wanted her emotionally safe. That sentence almost made me laugh from disbelief. Emotionally safe. She had taught a little girl to fear her own mother's stress instead of understanding it. And the terrifying part. I truly believed Colleen thought she was justified. That's what made everything feel so disturbing. This wasn't revenge for her. It was control disguised as protection. One of Ava's teachers, Mrs. Holloway, stepped forward quietly then. She looked genuinely shaken. I thought Ava was just unusually emotionally cautious, she whispered softly. I didn't realize somebody was reinforcing it at home. Another teacher wiped tears from her face near the stage curtains. Then the school counselor spoke carefully. That kind of emotional conditioning changes how children process safety and attachment. The word conditioning made several people visibly uncomfortable. Because now there was no softer way left to describe what happened. This wasn't overprotective grandmother behavior anymore. This was manipulation. Real manipulation. And everybody in that room finally saw it clearly. Meanwhile, Ava still hadn't stopped crying. She kept clutching my dress tightly while trying to catch her breath between sobs. Then very quietly, almost too quietly to hear, she whispered, "Mommy." I pulled back slightly to look at her. Her little face was completely red from crying. And then she said the sentence that emotionally crushed every person in that auditorium. "I thought I was supposed to be scared of you sometimes." Nobody moved after that. Nobody even pretended not to cry anymore. I heard someone near the back gasp softly. One parent covered her mouth completely. Even the principal lowered her head for a second. Because hearing a child say something like that out loud forces everybody to understand how deep the damage really goes. I held Ava's face carefully in both hands. "Baby," I whispered through tears, "you never had to be scared of me." Ava immediately started apologizing. Over and over. "I'm sorry. I thought Grandma was helping. I didn't know." And honestly, that broke me more than the public humiliation ever did. Because children should never feel guilty for believing trusted adults. Especially family. Colleen tried speaking again, but this time even relatives started reacting differently. Her sister Diane looked completely ashamed standing near the wall. One of Colleen's cousins shook her head slowly and muttered, "You went too far." Another relative quietly asked, "How long has this been happening?" Nobody defended Colleen anymore. Not after the recordings. Not after the notebooks. Not after Ava admitted she believed fear was normal around me. The emotional weight of it became impossible to excuse. Eventually the principal gently asked families to clear the auditorium while staff stayed behind to document everything formally because some of the recordings involved emotional harm toward a child. That reality hit Colleen hard. For the first time, real panic crossed her face. And suddenly her tone changed again. Now she cried softer. Looked smaller somehow. "Mallory. Please," she whispered. "Don't take Ava away from me." That sentence almost destroyed me emotionally because part of me still remembered the woman who helped us after my divorce. The woman who braided Ava's hair. Made soup when I got sick. Held us together when life felt impossible. But standing there holding my crying daughter while years of manipulation sat exposed behind us on projector screens. I realized something painful. Someone can love a child deeply and still damage them terribly. And from that moment forward, I knew things could never go back to normal again. Boundaries came immediately afterward. Supervised visits only. Limited calls. No private emotional conversations with Ava anymore. At first Colleen fought it emotionally. Then legally. Then quietly. But the trust was gone. Completely gone. And honestly, that was the real tragedy underneath everything. Not just that she manipulated my daughter. But that she destroyed the family she claimed she was trying to protect. It's been almost 8 months since Ava's graduation. 8 months since the recordings. Since the notebooks. Since the moment my daughter stood on a stage and realized somebody she trusted had taught her to fear her own mother. And honestly, healing after something like that doesn't happen all at once. Movies make people think one emotional hug fixes everything. Real life doesn't work like that. Real healing is quieter. Messier too. At first, Ava still apologized constantly. Even after everything came out. If she dropped something, she apologized. If she forgot homework, she apologized. If she cried too loudly after a nightmare, she apologized for waking me up. Like somewhere deep inside her, she still believed love could disappear if she became too much. That realization hurt me every single time. So I became patient in ways I never knew I could. Not perfect. Just intentional. I stopped rushing every moment. Stopped answering work emails during dinner. Started listening more carefully when Ava talked, even about tiny things like playground drama or cartoons I didn't understand. And slowly, little pieces of her started returning. The real Ava. The relaxed Ava. The little girl who used to dance around grocery store aisles and laugh too hard during baking disasters. One Friday evening we were making homemade tacos together while music played softly from my kitchen speaker. Ava accidentally sprinkled way too much chili powder into the meat and looked up in complete panic. For a second, I saw it again. That fear. That immediate expectation that somebody was about to become angry. Then she whispered quickly. "I'm sorry." I just stared at her for a second before laughing softly. "Baby, we're not filming a cooking show. We'll survive spicy tacos." Ava blinked. Then slowly. She laughed too. A real laugh. Comfortable. Unforced. And honestly, hearing that sound again healed something inside me I didn't even realize was still broken. The biggest moment happened about 2 months later. We were sitting together on the couch doing homework while rain tapped softly against the windows. Ava reached for her juice box too fast and knocked it across the carpet. Orange juice spilled everywhere instantly. And immediately Ava froze. Completely froze. Her shoulders tensed automatically like her body still remembered fear before her mind could catch up. I looked at her. Then at the mess. And instead of frustration, I just grabbed paper towels and smiled. Well. I guess the carpet wanted a drink too. For a second Ava just stared at me silently. Then something changed in her face. Not dramatic. Small. But important. Her body relaxed. Actually relaxed. No fear. No nervous apology. No cautious silence. Just relief. And I think that was the moment I realized the fear between us was finally starting to disappear. Not because of one speech. Not because of one confrontation. But because safe love had been repeated enough times to finally feel believable again. These days, Ava hugs me naturally again. She corrects mistakes without panicking. Talks openly when she's upset. Laughs louder. And sometimes she even rolls her eyes at me like normal kids do when I remind her to clean her room. Honestly, I treasure those little moments now more than anything. Because I almost lost them without realizing it. As for Colleen, things never fully recovered. There are supervised visits sometimes, short phone calls occasionally, but the trust is gone. Completely gone. And maybe that's the saddest part of this entire story. Because the people who damage children emotionally the deepest don't always sound cruel. Sometimes they sound protective. Gentle. Loving. Sometimes they truly believe they're helping. And sometimes they sound exactly like family. So tell me honestly in the comments. Could you ever forgive someone who taught your child to fear you? And have you ever experienced a situation where someone slowly tried to replace your role in a loved one's life? If this story touched you emotionally, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Her Revenge Stories, and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. And before you leave, check out the other stories on this channel. Because some of them might hit closer to home than you expect.